When my 10-year-old daughter kept her first fast, she went with me to get things for iftar, but a speeding car crushed her, and she left this world. After this accident, my wife lost her mind from the shock. At night, she would say that our daughter is crying on the rooftop. I would give her sleeping pills to make her sleep because I myself had buried my daughter. One day, at the time of suhoor, I too heard the sound of my daughter crying. I got scared and ran to the rooftop, but the silence there tore through my heart. Today, when I left the office early at 2 o'clock, there was something different in my heart. I wanted to fly to my wife Saba and give her the good news that after 6 years, I'm going to be a father again. Her medical reports were in my hand, and she was impatiently waiting for me at home. On the way, I saw a flower shop, so I bought jasmine garlands for her because she really loved jasmine garlands. When I reached home, I saw her standing at the door waiting for me. I smiled slightly because I knew that she was more restless than I was, but hiding my joy, I stayed serious and hid the garlands. She kept looking at me with silent eyes, but couldn't gather the courage to ask anything. Maybe in her heart was the fear that this time too the report might be wrong. I could understand how badly she would cry whenever her hope broke, and it would take me several days to console her. I knew her pain because she was my first love. I had loved her from my heart, and that's why even after so many years I never thought about marrying again. As soon as I entered the house, I moved inside, and she followed me closely. As soon as we reached the room, I suddenly turned and looked at her and jokingly asked, "Yes, sister, what's the matter? Why are you staring at me so intently?" She turned her gaze away and said, "Nothing, just like that. I'll make tea for you." In her eyes, love for me was shining. That's the reason why I couldn't even imagine leaving her. In all these years of marriage, no matter how sick or tired she was, she always cared for my comfort more than her own. That's why I had decided that I wouldn't bother her anymore. Just as she turned, I stepped forward, held her arm, and whispered in her ear, "Congratulations to you." She instantly trembled and looked at me. A strange glow appeared in her eyes. "Are you telling the truth?" she said in a trembling tone. Then I looked at her, smiling. At that moment, she was overwhelmed with emotions. Tears were continuously falling from her eyelashes onto her cheeks. I wiped her tears with my fingers and told her with a smile, "I am absolutely telling the truth." Then once again, she started crying with joy. I said teasingly, "These tears aren't right on such a happy occasion. Allah has granted us this joy after such a long time, so be grateful." She nodded to my words and, in a lost expression, kept looking at the reports again and again. She held them close to her chest and said, "Oh Allah, thank you." "Come, let's go tell Mother this news too. She's been waiting for this more than us," I said. She looked at me with sparkling eyes and got up with me to go to my mother's room. To hear this good news of a child, both of us, husband and wife, had withered like thorns, but even my mother was desperate to hear this news. She wasn't just a symbolic presence, but for a long time, waiting for the offspring of her only son. Perhaps she had grown old. That's why now, whenever she sat or stood, she would tell me that I should consider a second marriage. When I first heard these words from my mother's mouth, I was shocked, because my mother was the real maternal aunt of my wife Saba, and our marriage had been arranged by her with great hopes. She sincerely wished that Saba would become the daughter-in-law of her home. That's why as soon as I got a job, my mother immediately went to their house. My mother wanted Saba to become her daughter-in-law as soon as possible, but Saba's mother was not yet in favor of marrying off her daughter. She said that Saba should first complete her education, but my mother insisted, "We're not stopping her from studying. She can study as much as she wants after coming to our home." Then her aunt could not refuse my mother for long, and that's how I got married to her, and Saba came to our house as my bride. My mother had given Saba permission to continue studying, but when the first year of marriage was completed, my mother suddenly changed into a traditional mother-in-law. Saba gave up her education. Although I tried very hard to support her, whenever her hopes were shattered, she would fall into severe mental depression. On one hand, my mother constantly told her to leave her studies and think about having children. On the other hand, the Relatives who visited our house would always ask my mother when the daughter-in-law would be expecting, and before leaving they would say such things to Saba that she would be left in agony. But she never said a word in response to anyone. I would sometimes be astonished at Saba. Where did she get such a big heart from? Because there were times when even I could not bear my mother's words and would speak out, "Mother, these things are in God's hands. When Allah wills it, we will have children." But my mother would scold me instead. It's been more than a year since the wedding, and the daughter-in-law is still not expecting. All the boys your age who got married are now fathers of one child each. How long will this go on? My mother even began talking about my second marriage. That's when Saba became extremely scared, because my mother had clearly said that she would only wait for 1 more year, and after that, she would ensure my marriage happened no matter what. After hearing my mother's words, Saba left for her parents' house in anger and told my mother directly, "Don't wait another year, go ahead and fulfill your dreams right now." As soon as she reached her parents' house, within half an hour, her aunt called me. She scolded me unnecessarily and said many things. I was furious at Saba. Why did she take the matter from our home to her mother's house? She could have at least waited for me to return. I also decided I wouldn't go to her house to bring her back. When I returned from the office and reached home directly, I even fought with my mother. What was the need to say all that to Saba? But my mother was also sitting there angrily. She said, "How long do you expect me to watch this hide and seek? Your wife went on her own will." I got angry at my mother too. If you knew she was leaving in anger, why didn't you stop her? And why can't you understand that this isn't in her control? Giving birth to a child is only in Allah's hands. Perhaps my mother too was burdened deeply, for when she angrily said, "I know it's not in her control, but a person should at least try to find a solution. Every time I bring medicine from the doctor, why doesn't she take it? People do. All kinds of things for children. I am certain your wife takes pills to avoid pregnancy." I couldn't hold myself back. Hearing my mother say that, I burst out in anger. "Mother, for God's sake, don't accuse her like that. When all her reports are clear, what kind of medicine do you expect her to take that would instantly give us a child? You tell me, what's the solution to this? Why can't you understand that this is all in Allah's hands?" Hearing me, my mother sat down holding her head and said, "It's useless to explain things to you both." I quietly went to my room, but the unrest inside me only kept growing. Such conversations had happened at home before, but this time the way Saba left the house in anger hurt me deeply. When I entered the room and didn't find her there, my heart sank. For a moment, I felt like going and bringing her back, but then I thought if I persuade her today, in the future she might leave again whenever she gets upset with my mother. The truth was that breathing in that room without her had become difficult. The entire night passed in restlessness. Again and again tears welled up, and I wiped them away harshly. At dawn, I sat up restlessly. My heart wanted to go and bring her back immediately, but my pride held me back. I sat with my head in my hands. When suddenly Saba's name flashed on my phone screen, I immediately answered the call, and upon hearing her crying on the other end, my heart melted. Surely she had been awake all night too. Her calling at this hour was proof that even she hadn't found peace there. Through sobs she said, "Numan, please take me back." I became angry and replied sharply, "Why? Did you ask me before leaving that now you're asking me to come get you? You should have thought about this before you left, saying you couldn't live without me." "So, you won't come?" she asked in disbelief, and somehow the words escaped my mouth. "No, I won't." She instantly hung up. Surely she must have been sitting there, crying. I began to regret my haste. I picked up my bike keys from the table right away and headed to her house. The moment I arrived, Saba heard my voice and came running down the stairs and threw herself into my arms. After that, all the things my mother had said to her about children, the pressure, the stress. She had left the house utterly helpless. Saba used to obey everything my mother said. Wherever my mother took her, Saba would silently follow. My mother simply wanted to provoke fights and bring about a divorce. There wasn't a single spiritual healer, peer, or fakir in the city my mother hadn't gone to for amulets, and she handed all of them to Saba. And even then Saba quietly used whatever amulets my mother gave her. Sometimes I was amazed. How did she bear all this? But maybe the desire for a child makes a person do anything. Perhaps Allah accepted the pain and prayers of all of us, because after a long time, good news finally arrived in our home. When my mother heard the news, she was overjoyed and hugged Saba while crying. During those 9 months, she took care of Saba in every possible way. And when Allah blessed us with a round-faced, moon-like baby girl, the joy in our home was beyond words. When my daughter Natasha turned 1, my mother passed away, and shortly after that Saba's parents also died. These deaths broke both me and Saba deeply, and perhaps we would have completely fallen apart. But it was Natasha's love that held the two of us together. Natasha kept us both so busy that we, as husband and wife, were soon able to emerge from the sorrow we had endured. After Natasha, Allah did not bless us with any more children, which saddened us both. I would often try to comfort Saba by saying, "Look at our neighbor Salim Sahib. He's grown so old, and yet he never had children either. But he and his wife live just fine despite that void. They've never once expressed regret or complained. You should be grateful that Allah at least gave you a child. Focus all your love on her and stop thinking about what's missing." I kept explaining this to Saba, and that's why she recovered relatively quickly. I noticed something. Compared to men, women are much more sensitive and deeply affected by matters related to children. If they receive just a little bit of support from their in-laws and husband, breathing becomes easier for them. And I wanted Saba to breathe freely, because in our society, people who don't have children are subjected to constant remarks, and even those who do aren't spared from judgment. Saba and I often went to the rooftop, where our terrace connected with Salim Sahib's. He and his wife would join us for tea and casual conversations. They adored Natasha and would often take her in their arms and shower her with love. The wall between our rooftops was low, and we'd sometimes just hand Natasha over so they could spend time with her. Natasha became very fond of them and often insisted on visiting their house. Saba would take her there, and they would be delighted by her presence. Time passed swiftly, and Natasha turned 10, and then came the storm that shattered our world. It was during the holy month of Ramadan. I remember clearly, it was the 12th fast. Natasha had kept her very first fast. I was going to be late from work, so I called Salim Sahib and asked him to please bring the items for iftar to my house. An hour before iftar, he took Natasha to his place, saying he'd drop her off at iftar time. But when he went to buy the iftar items, a speeding car ran over Natasha, and she died on the spot. When Saba saw Natasha's body, she went mad with grief. I lost control of myself too. I buried my innocent daughter with my own hands. My heart was torn to pieces. My little girl died while fasting. My entire world collapsed. I didn't know how to go on, how to manage our home, how to live. During this time, Salim Sahib and his wife tried hard to take care of us. One day, his wife gently suggested that we admit Saba to a mental hospital so she could recover. But I rejected her suggestion. I couldn't spend a moment without Saba. Instead, I began her treatment through a doctor, but the trauma was too deep. She couldn't return to her senses. Exactly 1 month later, Saba told me one day that a man had taken Natasha up to the rooftop and that she was crying badly. "Go check," she said. I began to weep. How could I explain to her that I had already buried Natasha beneath the earth? No matter how many times I said it, she couldn't understand. She kept pointing to the rooftop with her finger, so I was forced to give her sleeping pills. If I didn't, she would run out of the room and rush to the rooftop screaming Natasha's name. These episodes would often occur around the same time of day Natasha had passed away. She'd hold my hands and say, "She was such a smart girl. How could she have gotten hit by a car while crossing the road? Someone must have killed her deliberately. Why aren't you catching them?" Hearing her words, I would break down in tears. I had filed a report with the police, but to this day, no one could find the car or the driver who took our Natasha away. Saba was convinced that someone had intentionally harmed Natasha. But who could be so cruel, I would wonder? Salim Sahib and his wife were such kind people. Saba had lost her mental stability, yet at times she seemed perfectly sane, like when she insisted we go to the police and investigate further. During such moments, it felt like she was entirely lucid. Because of her deteriorating condition, I began missing work for several days at a time. I stayed home just to care for her every moment. I feared that Saba might harm herself. One day after giving her sleeping pills, I found myself unable to sleep. Memories of Natasha kept me awake. Restlessly, I began pacing the room. I was slowly slipping into depression myself. Enduring this grief wasn't easy for me either. Suddenly, I heard crying sounds from the rooftop. The cries were exactly like Natasha's. I froze, fear creeping into my heart. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but when the sounds persisted, I rushed outside. The cries were definitely coming from the rooftop, and it wasn't a hallucination. When I reached the rooftop, I saw Salim Sahib standing there, facing the wall, crying loudly, his hands folded, repeatedly calling Natasha's name and begging for forgiveness. My heart ached. I approached him, and as soon as he saw me, he panicked and backed away. Then he began pulling at his hair, shouting, "For God's sake, save me from this torment, or I will die. Natasha doesn't let me live. She scares me every day. I will die from this fear." He started saying strange, horrifying things. Things I couldn't comprehend. He cried, "Tell Natasha to forgive me. I never meant to kill her. I didn't even want to hurt her. But that day she looked so beautiful. I don't know how the devil took over me. I brought her from your house to mine, and then took her up to the roof. I tried to force myself on her, but she got scared and began crying, saying she'd tell her father. I panicked, and when I went to get the iftar items, I pushed her in front of a speeding car myself. The driver wasn't at fault. I watched her die before my eyes. You never found out, because Natasha was never alive to tell you," he went on sobbing. "I thought I could live with my crime, but the burden on my conscience has grown so heavy. I can't sleep. I beg her for forgiveness every single day, right here on this rooftop where I tried to harm her. Tell her to forgive me." I stood there frozen, unable to move, my eyes wide in shock. If he was telling the truth, then my daughter was murdered. Ya Allah. I clutched my chest and tried to steady myself. I immediately informed the police inspector. Salim Sahib was arrested within half an hour, and he confessed everything. But at that moment, I realized that the fault wasn't his alone. It was also ours for trusting him so easily. God knows what else he may have done to my innocent daughter when she visited their home alone. She was so young, so naive. She wouldn't have even known what was happening. Today, Salim Sahib is serving his sentence, but I don't know how long I will live carrying this burden in my heart. Viewers, I leave the final judgment to you. Do you think I should forgive myself or not? And tell me, do you also blindly trust others with your loved ones? If yes, for God's sake, be extra cautious, especially when it comes to your daughters. Never trust anyone beyond limits. What's your opinion? Tell me in the comments. Thank you.